Uprooted Theatrical Studios presents.
It's 10 Tips Tuesday.
Hello, friends. How's everybody today? Thanks for coming back. I hope you enjoyed last week. I hope that you were able to get something out of that. It was a lot of fun putting it together. And before we go any further, I want to thank Madison and Rachel at Uprooted Theatrical Studios once again for inviting me. I'm so grateful to both of you for asking me to do this. It's quite fun. But I don't want to take too much time doing all of that because we've got a lot to cover to get these last 5 tips in. So let's get started. Tip number 6, look for antithesis. Now, in our present time, we normally think of antithesis as the comparison of opposites, right? Yes, no, black, white, good, bad, that kind of thing. That's what we imagine. But in Shakespeare's time, in Elizabethan thought, antithesis was another rhetorical device, right? We're talking about argument. We have an argument. Here's another way we can prove our argument. We're going to compare one thing with something else. They don't have to be opposites. We're simply comparing this thing with this thing. Okay, so we've got the example that I'm going to use is Sonnet 130. I love using the sonnets to try to take apart the various rhetorical devices of Shakespeare because they're beautiful little 14 verse line complete stories. They have a beginning, middle, and end, and you don't have to read a 4.5-hour play in order to find out what the story is. So let's take this one, Sonnet 130, and I'll read it and you can read along. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with faults compare. I love this sonnet. I think it's beautiful. It's a beautiful sonnet. It starts out as a joke where it sounds like we're making fun of this woman of color. Yes, because her breasts are dun, which is brown. That's the color of her breasts, and her hair is black wires. It's kinky. It's woolly. Yes, and it starts off as if we're speaking ill of her. And then we learn in the couplet, again, it's always in the couplet, not always, but primarily in the couplet, we get to the secret of the argument. My love is rare as any she belied with faults compare. In other words, she's more wonderful and more precious to me than any of those false ideas of beauty that the poets may have. Right? The idea that the ideal beauty for Elizabethan day was snow white skin, pale blonde hair, clear blue eyes, and this was because that's what Elizabeth the Queen looked like. So she was the epitome of beauty, and all women were compared to her. And this takes the stuffing right out of that idea, because even though she doesn't look like that, this is a woman of appetite. She's a woman of opinion. She's a woman of intellect. She walks on the ground. She's not she sees things in a very clear-eyed sort of way. And I think it's really quite beautiful because it turns the idea on its head. And Shakespeare's using another rhetorical device, that of irony. But we're here to talk about antithesis, so I'm going to get back to that. So let's take the first couple of lines, right? My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. What is he comparing? Mistress' eyes to the sun. Now, they're sort of similar in that they're both spherical. Eyes are spherical, and so is the sun. But just generally speaking, that's where the comparison, where their similarities end. Yes, but he's comparing one with the other. Her eyes are nothing like that. The eye of heaven, it doesn't look like that. Her eyes don't look like that. Okay? Then he says, this one is a really lovely line because it's a double antithetical line. Coral is far more red than her lips red. So he's comparing coral and lips, and I can't think of anything too further apart. Coral and lips, nothing even remotely. I can't even begin to stretch that out to figure out how to make them similar. But then he's also comparing red with red. So you have to somehow figure out a way to convince this to the audience. And I think a great way to start, what one of my great teachers, John Barton, said. He said, Mr. Cabus, hold your hands out like a scale and weigh them as you say them. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. So that you can start to compare coral and lips, sun and mistress eyes. So these objects are far outweighing the thing that he's talking about, the real subject, which is this woman. Yes? So you want to really look for these comparisons where something is being compared with something else and emphasize that. Remember, Shakespeare is not realism. So we're not striving to make this a kitchen sink drama. Remember? We're singing, right? It's musical comedy. We're singing about our love. This is in verse, and so it's big and it's grand. Use these tools. These are the tools that will help you convey the text to your audience. Okay? So number 6, look for antithesis. Good. Hello, everybody. It's another day. A lot to do on the farm. I've been out in the garden all morning trying to keep plants alive in this heat. So it's another day here in Pegram, and it's another tip for our 10 tips for playing Shakespeare. This is tip number 7. Repetition is very, very important. Why? Repetition, even though we probably all have a pretty good idea what that means, repetition is when a word or a phrase or a statement is repeated several times. And in Shakespeare's case, he means it to emphasize and develop a very particular idea or argument. Right? And we've talked about that. We talked about how rhetorical, the power of persuasive speaking, how rhetoric is what is the core of what Shakespeare is writing. Yes? So we have, it's, again, number 1, not realism. So we have to find the other ways to convey our ideas, to convey our arguments. Yes? And one of the rhetorical devices is repetition. Now, sometimes Shakespeare uses it to create a rhythm, because we talked about it. Shakespeare's all about rhythm, yes, but sometimes he uses it to create a rhythm, to get a sense of a particular subject, and we hear it again and again and again, so we get a sense of that. He's doing that. Or sometimes he uses repetition to break a rhythm. And again, to emphasize something very specific. These are all done to help develop your character's arguments. So we talked about last week, we used in our prose tip a speech of Falstaff's from Henry IV, Part 1, correct? It went, at least the last part of it that was repetitious went like this. Sweet Jack Falstaff, kind Jack Falstaff, true Jack Falstaff, valiant Jack Falstaff, and therefore more valiant, being as he is old Jack Falstaff. That's pretty obvious, right? There's a rhythm to it. He's wanting to hammer it into our brains that Falstaff is who is making the argument, is trying to hammer it into our brains that he is ineradicable in Hal's universe. It is impossible. Banish old Jack Falstaff and banish all the world. That's what he says. So this is a use of repetition, a very direct use of repetition to hammer home a particular argument. But there are other forms, and we're going to talk about two very specific ones in this tip. The first one is alliteration. Now, alliteration is the repetition of the same consonant sound throughout a line of verse, right? Normally, not always, but normally the consonant is at the beginning of the word. We had one, and we're going to go back and kind of look at this phrase again. We had one in our last segment, but when the blast of war blows in our ears. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to revisit that verse again a little later. But to get you to really hear this alliteration, and why I think it's important for us to look for it in Shakespeare and to emphasize it, is I'm going to use the prologue from Romeo and Juliet, and I've got about 4 lines of verse before we get to the actual alliteration. But I want you to listen for it and see if you can figure out why it's so important for Shakespeare to put it where he does. All right, so the prologue is written as a sonnet. It's quite beautiful, 14 lines, and we'll get to the what we're wanting to look at it in the 5th line, so pay attention. 2 households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. Ooh, an antithesis, yay. Here we go. From forth the fatal loins of these 2 foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. Now, I bet you figured out what the alliteration was, didn't you? F. There's an F, and it's used 4 times in the 5th verse line, right? And it also pops up in the middle of a word on the end of the 2nd verse line in life. So we have the sound, we hear it in from, forth, fatal, foes, and life. Now, why do you think Shakespeare wants us to really emphasize this and make the most of this alliteration? By doing this, I'm going to answer the question for you because you're not here to help me. The audience hears the delineation between the bigger part of the story, which is the feuding families. There's another alliteration for you. The feuding families, the 2 households, and the setting, and it narrows it down to the 2 people that this story is going to be the focus of, Romeo and Juliet, right? So we go from 2 households to a pair of star-crossed lovers. And by putting in this alliteration, Shakespeare draws a delineation. He puts a line in there that goes, this is where we're heading. We're going to telescope in. We're going to go in and really focus on these 2 people. Okay, so that's alliteration. It's a consonant sound that appears usually at the beginning of a word, but it's a repeated consonant sound in order to emphasize an idea or a point. The other one we're going to look at is assonance. Now, assonance is similar to alliteration, only it deals with vowel sounds. It's a similarity of internal vowel sounds. They're very rarely at the beginning of the word. They're usually inside the word. And they're all in close proximity to each other. They have a very similar use for Shakespeare. And we're going to take that same prologue, and we're going to look at the last 3 lines of it. We're going to skip down a little bit, and we're going to look at the last 3 lines, and I'm going to read them aloud and see if you can hear the assonance, the vowel sounds we're looking for. Is now the 2 hours traffic of our stage, the which, if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. Excuse me. So the words now, hours, and hour all have the same sound in that 12th line of verse. And this creates a sense of unity within the line itself. And then in line 13, the very line after that, which and with both contain that short I sound. Again, we're bringing an audience toward the conclusion. Remember, not always, but almost inevitably, a rhyming couplet, especially when you're dealing with in a sonnet situation, the rhyming couplet is taking you, the final couplet is taking you to the conclusion of the argument. This is where the argument resides. Yes? So the prologue here is saying, if you are patient with us, if you take your time, we will try and convey this story to you. Our toil will strive to mend. So we'll try to put this all together for you. So in conclusion with all of this, keep in mind that repetition is very, very, very important. Okay? Good. And like Biggie says, if you don't know, now you know. Hello again. Hi. It's another day out here on the farm, and it's a hot one. It's in the 90s. It's just sweltering. But I needed to be back into the garage with our friend, Mr. Bouncy Kickball, because we're going to come back and look at pentameter and the rhythm of pentameter, because it's really necessary. And tip number 8, not all pentameter is created equal. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, we know now that a regular line of iambic pentameter, dee-dum, 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 has 5 stressed syllables and 5 unstressed syllables. And that an iamb, that foot, is an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. Every time. That's what iambic pentameter means. 5 feet of iambs, unstressed, stressed syllables, all in a row. But sometimes Shakespeare changes that, right? He sometimes wants to set up a rhythm because he has something very intentional. Sometimes he wants to break that rhythm because he has something very intentional he's trying to say. He wants the actor to point it out to the audience because something is different about this. Okay, so I'm going to take I'm going to stick with Romeo and Juliet on this one, okay? So we're going to do a speech. We're probably all very familiar with it. It's Romeo in the garden below Juliet's balcony before she appears. So we're going to take that, and I'm going to walk you through it. Get your bouncy ball. And I think a big bouncy ball is important. It's got 2 purposes. One, you hear the rhythm, right? Because you hear the bounce, but you also get a physical sense of the rhythm because you're having to bounce the ball. So please, please, please don't, roll your eyes and go, oh, that is so lame. Don't try it. It will really be helpful to you in understanding how iambic pentameter works. Not only when I tell actors, let the words work on you. Don't work on the words. Let the rhythm work on you. It has a purpose, and it will get you where you want to go, but you've got to give into it. In fact, you want to embrace it and ride it like a wave, like you're a surfer on a wave. So here we go. I'm going to do Romeo and Juliet. Romeo, here we are. But soft what light through yonder window breaks. Oh, well, that was pretty easy. That went pretty straightforward, right? It was a fairly consistent line of iambic pentameter. Let's keep going. It is the east and Juliet is the sun. What just happened? There we have 11 beats. That just can't be right. And remember, we talked about 11 beats. The feminine ending. Yeah, ladies, again, apologies for misogyny in the Elizabethan era. 11 beats. The 11th beat has to be unstressed. And sun is not an unstressed syllable. It's a fully stressed syllable. So we have to honor it, and it has to be the 10th syllable. So there's another syllable somewhere in there we have to get rid of and condense. And elide is another word, an elision. So let's look at I'm going to take my glasses off just for a second because they're sliding off. I'm sweating too hard. You're making me sweat. You're making me sweat, Shakespeare. It is the east and. All single syllable words, Okay, so we can't do any elisions there. Is the sun, all single syllable words. There's only one word in the entire verse line that has multiple syllables, and it's the word Juliet. So we've got 3 syllables. That's where we need to take the syllable out. We need to figure out a way. So we're going to crunch it together and make it 2 and say Juliet. Let's see how that works. It is the east and Juliet is the sun. Hallelujah! We did it. So all we have to do is just crunch that word together and get rid of those extra syllables, right? So let's keep going and see how we do. Rise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. Oh no, not again. Shakespeare, what are you doing to us? So what he's done here is, again, the same thing. Arise, 2 syllables. There's not really anything we can crunch on that. Arise, fair sun, and kill the moon. Envious is the only 3-syllable word. So let's see how we do if we crunch that together. Rise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. We did it! So there we are. Juliet, envious. All right, let's keep going. Who is already sick and pale with grief? Great. That thou her maid art far more fair than she. Good. Be not her maid, since she is envious. Oh no, we can't do it here. We have to stretch the word out. So it's the same word, envious, and Shakespeare's had us crunch it, elide it in one verse line, and now he wants us to give us the complete, to recognize all the syllables in it. Let me check it out. Be not her maid, since she is envious. Great, done. Her vestal livery is but sick and green. Perfect. And none but fools do wear it, cast it off. Excellent. It is my lady, oh, it is my love. Now, there's something I just want to point out here, and it's a little sidebar. One of my favorite words in all of Shakespeare, and anybody who's ever studied with me will know what it is. It's the word "oh." And I love the word "oh" because Shakespeare almost inevitably, it appears in a stressed place, and he wants it to have power. It's a beautiful word. It's a single letter. It's the roundest vowel sound, and it's the shape of the globe. Not only the shape of the globe, the earth, but the shape of the globe, the theater. Yes, the wooden O. So O is a really big deal in Shakespeare, and so I always really encourage actors to not ignore it. We as modern day, my computer's light here. We as modern day actors have a tendency to kind of throw O's away, but boy, I'm telling you, those guys didn't do that. So here it is. It is my lady. Oh, it is my love. There's something about it that Shakespeare wants you. Romeo's having a realization. He really wants you to make something of that word. And here we go. It is my lady. Oh, it is my love. Oh, and here's where it doesn't appear in a stressed line. Oh, that she knew she were. That's where the line ends. What? Where are the other 2 beats? Shakespeare's giving you what is called an earned pause. All right? So Shakespeare plays are incredibly long, anywhere from Hamlet, which is roughly around 2 hours, to King Lear, which is around 4 hours and 45 minutes. We're talking, we don't need a lot of pauses. Those ideas that we've got to take breaths and pause, that's realism, and Shakespeare is not realism. That's realism, and so we want to try to avoid lots and lots of pauses. But every once in a while, he gives you one, and he gives you an earned pause by not giving you a full line of a full 10-beat line. And so he's asking you, take a moment. There's a moment here. You're trying to figure something out. You're trying to put something together. You're having a moment of revelation. This is a moment or contemplation. So take this beat, and we will learn in the next one why Romeo says that. He goes, oh, that she knew that she were. Ah, he sees something. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Okay, that's good. Her eye discourses, I will answer it. Beautiful. That's also perfect. We've got that. Those all work really well. I am too bold, 'tis not to me she speaks. Great. Two of the fairest stars in all the heavens. Okay, wait a minute. Something's weird here, because that just doesn't sound right. Two of. Why are we stressing the word of? We already know there are 11 beats, so we need to condense it somehow. In her two of the fairest stars in all the heaven. I've made it plural, sorry about that. In all the heaven. So we have to rethink this. What if we look at this just a little differently? We look at this line as if the first syllable were stressed and the second syllable was. Two of the fairest stars in all the heaven. What the hell did you just do, Mark? Okay, so I did a thing on that first two syllables. Is not an I am, it's a trochee, right? And trochees appear because Shakespeare, again, wants to break up that rhythm. Yeah, they happen, they appear, and it's the first syllable is stressed and the second syllable is not, as in two of. Yes? So they happen sometimes, and you have to be very aware of that. And then I took that last word, heaven. We could have made it 11 beats, and that would have been fine, heaven. But I can also elide it and make it one word, hen. So what we've been able to do is two things in one. Two of the fairest stars in all the heaven. What's the next word? I don't know where I am. I'm lost. Having some business, because we don't say having, we go having some business, do entreat her eyes. So we have two lines that begin with trochees. Okay, so be aware of them. Look out for them. They can appear in the middle of a line. They can be anywhere. Just be conscious of that. If it doesn't sound right, having sounds weird. Two of sounds weird. It sounds weird to your ear. It doesn't sound normal. So try the idea that it might be a trochee, and Shakespeare is going, two of the fairest stars in all the heaven, having some business, do entreat her eyes. All pentameter is not created equal. Hi, I'm back again. I just wanted to make a quick addition to this, that I made a mistake last week when we were doing this, when we were counting out, using the bouncy ball, counting out pentameter. I made a mistake with the Henry V speech, and I want to thank all my colleagues and friends out there who knew I did this wrong and who didn't say anything and didn't make me look foolish. I want to thank you. You're wonderful people. So let me go back and I will show you what we did. Unto the breach, dear friends, once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more, or close the wall up with our English dead. In peace there nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, that's what I should have done, because that's a trochee. Yeah? And Shakespeare's putting it there. Why? Because Harry is about to describe to his people how they need to behave and how they need to act differently from peacetime and in wartime, how they need to set their brains in order to go into battle, right? Much like when Romeo changes the rhythm, because he has figured out who Juliet is talking to and what has her interest. Two of the fairest stars in all the heaven, having some business, do entreat her eyes, to twinkle there they in her head. So Yes, Shakespeare wants you to be aware. He breaks the rhythm for a reason. And I wanted to go back and correct that so you all either didn't know what I was talking about, or you went back and listened to it and thought, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't seem right. So hopefully you get it. Yes? But when the blast of war blows in our ears. So trochees can appear in the middle of verse lines too. Watch out for them. They're there. Hi. Whoo, it's really warm out here. As you can see, I'm sweating. It's over, I think it's like 93, 94 degrees outside. It may be warmer, but I'm in the shade and I've got my water, so I'm good. I'll make sure that I drink plenty of fluids and stay hydrated for you, okay? So I think I said yesterday that in these tips, we would get really expansive and then we would shrink the other direction, and the last couple of tips would be less complicated, and they are. The last one that we went back to the garage for, there was a lot of information we needed to cover, and I wanted to make sure that you understood what trochees were and had a better example of elisions, so that was really necessary. This last two, we're going to deal more with how we as modern actors need to reframe our brains in order to perform Shakespeare's non-realism. Okay? So tip number 9, there is no subtext in Shakespeare. What does this mean? Well, as we know, in contemporary text, almost everything we do is about subtext. You can say hello to somebody and mean I love you, or you can mean I hate you. There's all kinds of other things that you could be saying under the word hello. But because modern text is about conciseness, yes, I mean, you even have modern writers that have entire conversations that are almost monosyllabic, right? Not so in Shakespeare. Shakespeare's characters, their heightened language is deep and it's complex, and there is a lot for us to play with and to work with. And everybody says exactly what they mean. Even if they're lying to you, what they're doing is they're only telling part of the truth. One of the key elements was years ago when I played Iago was understanding that everybody calls him Honest Iago for a reason. He doesn't lie. He just doesn't tell the whole truth. Okay? And there's a difference to that. So you may point out, a lot of people point out the gulling scene in Much Ado About Nothing with Beatrice and Benedick, in which their friends are talking about them behind their backs or within their hearing about how much the other person loves them. Well, all of that stuff is true. None of that is false. Those aren't lies. Beatrice really does love Benedick. Benedick really does love Beatrice. Where they might not be sick and dying for them, that's not really a lie. It's more of an exaggeration. It's another rhetorical tool and device in order to keep the argument and make a point. So nobody says anything that they don't actually mean. So when you approach a character, don't worry about the subtext, because you're saying everything that's on your heart and everything that's in your mind. So tip number 9, whoo, that was fast. Tip number 9, there is no subtext in Shakespeare. Hi. Hello, and welcome to another part of In a City Farm out here in Pegram, Tennessee. Isn't this beautiful? It's just gorgeous. I'm so incredibly fortunate to get to live here, and I wanted to share it with you. So tip number 10 is, again, part of us getting in our headspace as actors. And tip number 10 is Shakespearean actors must be archaeologists and detectives. What does this mean? Shakespeare didn't write stage directions. I doubt very, very seriously that Shakespeare ever expected that 450 some years later, you and I would be having this conversation about his work. I don't think he ever put that into his head. Yes, playwrights want their works to be produced over and over and for people to do it for a long period of time, but I'm guessing this was never a part of his plan. And so he wrote very specifically for a specific group of people. He wrote, and he was able to tell them what he meant. So there was a lot of conversation that could be had in order to get what he wanted to present across. But also, he also built stage directions into his text. The speech that we just worked on, we know what time of day is it? What time of day is it? What light through yonder window breaks. It is the east, and Julia is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief, that thou her maid art far more fair than she. And then he later says, two of the fairest stars in all the heaven. So what time of day is it? It's nighttime. He doesn't put that in there. It doesn't say balcony scene, nighttime. He doesn't put that. He writes it in the text because his plays were performed during the daytime. They were performed outdoors. The globe, as we said earlier, was an O. It was a wooden O. The roof of it, the biggest part of the roof, was open to the sky. Why? Because candles were too costly and they could burn the theater down, and electricity had not been harnessed yet. So I think it's pretty clear that he needs to be able to express to his audiences what time of day it is, what the weather is, the relationship with people. Almost inevitably, within a very short period of time, characters will come on stage and they'll all call each other by their names and their titles. So you learn that within very, very bit of information, but don't take that for granted, okay? That's to help you. But there are other things that you absolutely have to do as actors that go beyond just what's in the text, yeah? You have to look up words. Yesterday we did the sonnet 133, and there's the verse line, if snow be white, why then her breasts are dun, D-U-N. Did any of you know that that meant brown before I told you what that meant? Well, I can't tell you how many times I assign the sonnet to students and they come in and they've not looked up that word. And I ask them, what does that mean? And they'll say they don't know. And in this day and age of the internet, when you can just go take your phone and go onto an app or onto Google and type in a word and find out what it means, that's just criminal and freaking lazy. So don't be lazy. Look up all the words. And chances are pretty good, if a word has a double meaning, it may even have a triple or quadruple meaning. And you can pretty much guarantee that Shakespeare meant all 4 different definitions. So you need to know that in order to know how to play that word. So look up the words, find out what the definitions are. Do not walk away from that kind of work. That's easy work. That's not a hard thing to do. Also, I think it's really important for you as actors to familiarize yourself with a number of different editions, because all the editions from Penguin to Oxford, all of the different editions that are out there have different ways of looking at the text, right? We all start here. I'm going to kind of get out of frame here for just a second. We all start with this, the first folio. This is a facsimile, and sadly, they're coming out of print, so they're becoming more and more expensive, because back in the day when this first was published, I think it was like about $15, and now it may be almost twice that. But as you can see, what it has is it's a facsimile of the original folio text, right? That print, that really, really old print that's sometimes really hard to read. I think this is the source. This is the Shakespeare. So this is where we start. Yeah. So I think this is always a good place to have one of these around. There are websites that you can go to where you can get copies of the folio and the way things are spelled, because sometimes not only are proper names capitalized, but words are capitalized. Two of the fairest stars. Stars is capitalized in all the heaven, capitalized. So it's suddenly not just stars. They are the 2 stars. There are no other stars in heaven, and it is the only heaven. So you begin to understand the importance of why these words were chosen and that they had real significance to Shakespeare and to his audience. And when they heard those words, they would know what's going on, right? They would be able to follow the text. Now, my favorite edition is the Oxford. I'm just a big fan of this one. I think it's the closest to the original, to the folio, and I think that these scholars are pretty much right on the money. It also seems to have a somewhat more contemporary feel to it. I don't know that I can explain that other than I think that the punctuation is very, very good, their adherence to the folio. But the problem with the Oxford, and I'm going to go back to that, is there are no footnotes. See, it's not annotated. There's no definitions. It's just text. So you sometimes need to get another version. This is the new Oxford Shakespeare, and it's the complete works. And as you can see by this, see, there are annotations. There are things there are annotations in the margins, and there are footnotes at the bottom with definitions and context. So those are all very helpful. This is why we have to be architects. Architects. We have to be archaeologists. Not even the same thing. Architects build stuff up. Archaeologists dig stuff that have already fallen. So you have to dig. That's why I use the term archaeologist, because you have to really dig sometimes to find the answers to things. And you have to be a detective. You have to be able to put the clues that Shakespeare has given to you together in order to piece ideas and situations, because he doesn't necessarily give you history of who these people are and what their connections are. And people will all say, they'll give you clues, it's all in the text, but sometimes you have to go through the whole text and not just look at your own lines, but look at what other people say about you in order to put together your character's personal history. So Shakespearean actors must be archaeologists and detectives in order to do this work. Okay? I hope this has been helpful to you. I really do. I've had a lot of fun doing it, despite the hot weather and all the sweating that I'm doing. I've had a really, really great time. And thanks again, Madison and Rachel, for asking me to do this. Please, I'm going to, right across the bottom here, I'm going to give you how you can get in touch with Uprooted Theatrical Studios. They're producing original work and doing readings online and on Facebook. Please support them. They're doing marvelous, marvelous work, and I could not be prouder. They're Belmont students, and they're making the most of this very difficult situation that we are all in right now to try to make theater, to be theater makers. So I ask that you support them, if you would, please. If you have any questions, please feel to reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, easy to find. Send me an instant message, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day. Please, please, please be safe, be healthy, be well. Wear a face mask, wash your hands, and socially distance. And we can get through this really difficult time that we're going through. Yeah? Shakespeare wrote during plagues. He wrote some of his greatest plays during plagues. So we can still do work. We just have to be adaptable, flexible. We need to evolve a little bit. All right? Don't we all? Take care. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this has been helpful. Till we meet again.